Kidnapping, torture, and mutilation. These are some of the misfortunes that can befall you or your family if criminals suspect that you've made money in crypto. And I'm not being alarmist for the sake of it. Violent crime targeting crypto holders is on the rise around the world, with Western Europe emerging as a major flashpoint. Today, we investigate the latest crime wave terrorizing our industry to find out what's going on and just how worried we should be. My name is Nick, and you're watching the Coin Bureau. For as long as there have been blockchain wallets secured by bulletproof cryptography, thieves have been exploiting a loophole, the flesh and bone of their much less bulletproof owners. When cybersecurity isn't easily compromised, violence becomes the path of least resistance for crypto thieves. No coding knowledge is needed. All you need is a human target, a violent predisposition, a weapon, and ideally some like-minded villains to collaborate with. Can't hack a crypto wallet? No problem. Threaten its owner with some heavy object, and you're in. At least that's the classic wrench attack. So, for example, if you flaunt your crypto gains on social media, local bad guys might start taking notes and mug you on sight. Sad, but we know it's all possible. But recently, wrench attacks of a more sophisticated nature have been making headlines around the world. Organized crime groups have stepped in, and their methods are much more sinister than your average alleyway stick-up. Kidnapping, mutilation, and ransom have become common features of the latest wave of violent crime targeting victims thought to own a large amount of crypto. Cases following this pattern have been reported in the UK, Belgium, Spain, Ukraine, South Africa, Costa Rica, Russia, Turkey, Thailand, Canada, and the US. However, it's France that is leading the world in high-profile crypto kidnapping cases this year. Now, I'll caveat this by saying that the cases that make it onto the news are likely the tip of the iceberg. For every incident reported, there are likely several others that go unreported for various reasons. For example, victims may be traumatized and fear being targeted again if their ordeal is made public. And repeat attacks on the same person have been recorded in the UK, so this is a very real and rational fear, by the way. Alternatively, any case involving ransom that doesn't end in a victory for law enforcement is a terrible precedent for the state, which will have a motive to prevent the news from reporting on it. Or, in parts of the world where violent crime is common, individual crypto kidnappings may face stiff competition to make it onto the news, especially if the victim does not have a public profile. But that's only speculation, so for now, let's stick to what we know, and that is that crypto holders in France are being terrorized by a wave of kidnappings this year, with many cases sharing striking similarities. The first such case in France this year began on New Year's Eve, when two criminals burst into the family home of a Dubai-based crypto influencer in Saint-Denis-Pouilly. They tied up his mother and his sister, kidnapping his father, and contacted the influencer himself, demanding a ransom payment. The influencer immediately contacted the police, who were able to free his sister and his mother. The following night, French police stopped a car at a service station in Le Mans, some 500 kilometers from where the kidnapping took place. Two hooded suspects fled the vehicle, leaving the cops to hear someone crying for help from inside the trunk. Inside, they discovered the 56-year-old father tied up, severely beaten, disorientated, and doused with gasoline. We couldn't find any report of the perpetrators being apprehended, so they may still be at large. Around the same time, police in Dijon foiled an alleged plot to kidnap a tax advisor and his wife, who were reportedly targeted for their crypto holdings. The couple noticed a pair of apparently stolen vehicles with false license plates casing their house and following their cars for days on end. Luckily, the police put an end to the alleged plot, having been alerted by the couple in December after a GPS tracker was found in front of their house. A third incident followed on January 21st when David Bolland, one of the 8 co-founders of Ledger, was abducted with his wife from their home in Meaux, which is in central France. The kidnappers took their hostages to 2 separate addresses, cut off one of Bolland's fingers, and sent a video of the severed appendage to another of Ledger's co-founders, which was Eric Lachavec, along with a demand for 10 million euros paid in crypto. €3 million of the ransom was paid, but almost all of it was frozen and seized after a successful rescue operation. This involved almost 100 police officers who freed Balan from a property several miles away the following day. The attackers did make some effort to launder the ransom that they had received using a large number of transactions and cross-chain bridging. However, they made a rookie mistake by trying to launder most of the funds into Tether's USDT, leading to Tether freezing all but $150,000 of the ransom. Balan's wife was found the next day tied up in the trunk of a car in Essonne, 12 miles south of Paris. Police arrested 10 suspects, including the suspected ringleader, a 26-year-old with a police record for previous kidnappings. At least 6 have been charged by French prosecutors, and if convicted, they face up to life in prison. As you may have noticed, the Balan kidnapping coincided with a major local top for the price of BTC, which reached a new all-time high past $109,000 just hours before the crime. Predictably, organized crypto ransom crimes tend to take place when the markets are running at their hottest. It was no coincidence then that a second kidnapping attempt happened in France later that same week. On January 25th, a crypto miner in the northeastern town of Troyes was lured into what he thought was a business meeting with 4 individuals who kidnapped him and held him hostage at a suburban property. The perpetrators in this case were thankfully less ambitious, keeping the 30-year-old victim in good health and demanding a more modest €20,000 for his release. Luckily, he managed to contact a friend who called the police, leading to his rescue and the arrest of the 4 suspects at the scene that evening.
The Coin Bureau Deals page. It won't make you stronger, but it will make you better at crypto.
Now, after an action-packed January, you'll remember that February, March, and much of April saw crypto prices take a deep nosedive. And as prices slipped, so too did the number of crypto kidnappings making the headlines. We can actually see this from a log of wrench attacks reported in English-language news media maintained by Jamison Lopp, a co-founder and chief security officer of Bitcoin security provider Casa. Lopp has recorded 232 incidents since 2014, including 43 cases involving hostage-taking and ransom demands. As I mentioned earlier, any list based on news articles is definitely not going to give us the full picture. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see how Lopp's entries multiply during bull markets and dry up when prices are falling. For example, Lopp recorded 21 wrench attacks during the 3-month bull market from November through January and just 11 during the 3-month market correction from February through April. Bitcoin exploded back into action in late April and has since reclaimed 100K. So, you know what that means. Violent crime is picking up again. Lo and behold, the first 2 weeks of May saw 3 new entries into the log, 2 of which were kidnappings in Paris. One case saw a 50-year-old man abducted in broad daylight while walking his dog in Paris on the morning of April 29th. The victim, who co-owned a crypto marketing firm with his son, was thrown into the back of a van by 4 men wearing ski masks. In what looks like a horrific mashup of the earlier episodes in France, the captors took him to a property in Essonne, where they tied him up and cut off one of his fingers. The victim's son was then sent a gruesome video evidence along with a demand for a ransom of 5 to 7 million euros in exchange for his father's release. What was peculiar about this case, however, was that the perpetrators demanded the sum be paid in fiat currency via wire transfer, not by crypto. No doubt they were aware of the crypto ransom in the Balan case had been traced, frozen, and seized by law enforcement, and didn't want to make the same mistake. The only problem is that it's just as easy, if not easier, for law enforcement to trace, freeze, and seize wire transfers. One has to wonder, if not for a launderable crypto ransom payment, then why was this wealthy crypto entrepreneur's father singled out for a kidnapping? Maybe the victim and his son had flaunted their wealth on social media, drawing the attention of criminals. And maybe those criminals found their public crypto wallet addresses and deemed them sufficiently high-value targets based on that information. For now, we can only speculate. On May 3rd, the victim was freed from the trunk of a car in Normandy, having been tortured and doused with gasoline. The kidnappers were allegedly preparing to pierce one of his knees with a drill. Thankfully, a police raid thwarted the operation and resulted in 5 arrests. All suspects are reportedly in their 20s and could face charges of kidnapping, quote, with torture or a barbaric act, according to an AP report. The second case in Paris this May went viral on social media after a bloody struggle on the street was caught on video by multiple witnesses. In a familiar setup, 3 hooded and masked criminals ambushed a family of 3 with a fake gun and tear gas in broad daylight as they were walking through Paris's 11th arrondissement. Among the victims were the 34-year-old daughter and 2-year-old grandson of the CEO and founder of a European crypto exchange, Paymian. The attackers attempted to drag the woman into the back of a white delivery van, but were met with resistance as she and her bloodied husband, who suffered a fractured skull, clung to each other on the ground, shouting for help. The abduction attempt was aborted after an intervention by a nearby bike shop owner brandishing a fire extinguisher, and he, of course, chased these criminals and they sped away in a waiting van. At the time of making this video, the perpetrators are unfortunately still at large. This spate of attacks in France has put the local crypto industry on edge and fire under the feet of the authorities. In particular, Interior Minister Bruno Retailleer has been forced to act, recently meeting with industry leaders and the Director General of the National Police to discuss measures to, quote, prevent, deter, and protect. After the meeting, Retailleer expressed his determination to, quote, put an end to these unbearable attacks targeting crypto asset professionals, and announced new security measures for crypto professionals, including priority access to emergency services and home security assessments by the police, among others. Also discussed was police training to prevent crypto money laundering, which is interesting because recent cases in France have shown the criminals' laundering skills to be very poor at best. In a recent blog post, Chainalysis observed that the crypto ransom and laundering side of the recent kidnapping cases were remarkably unsophisticated, contrasting with the high-stakes kidnapping and torture operations. A common theme in the reporting on the kidnappings in France is the idea that criminals are fools who do not understand that crypto is a poor choice for money laundering since it exists on a public ledger and, in many cases, can be frozen and seized remotely at the request of law enforcement. If this is true, it is quite surprising. It recalls the kinds of arguments we had back in the Silk Road era when skeptics erroneously portrayed crypto as a money launderer's best friend. Since then, the entire crypto industry has spent years trying to reassure the world that blockchains are very bad money laundering channels. And now that we are in the stage of institutional and nation-state crypto adoption, the idea that organized crime groups do not understand this stretches the imagination. It's hard to believe that criminals could be so readily prepared to mutilate and torture without having a sound plan to make off with the ransom. But this is what we saw in France this year, especially in the Ballon case. As far as we know, none of the kidnapping plots in France this year have ended in the successful laundering of the crypto ransom. And following the Ballon affair, we even saw a crypto kidnapping where the suspects demanded a ransom via a bank transfer, a choice so poor that it's almost suspicious. We can only hope that the repeated failure of kidnapping plots in France will dissuade future attempts, but so far, the criminals are showing no signs of giving up in France, or anywhere else for that matter. Based on Jamison Lop's incident log, 2025 looks set to be a record year for wrench attacks around the world. There were 21 entries in 2023 and 28 in 2024, but the first 4.5 months of 2025 already has 18 entries and counting as of mid-May, and needless to say, France is doing much of the heavy lifting in this regard. So, what's up with that anyway? Well, some reports have suggested that French organized crime groups are copying methods they've observed elsewhere abroad. The Spanish newspaper El País drew a comparison between the recent events in France and the 2023 murder of Fernando Perez Algaba, a millionaire crypto influencer whose arms and legs were discovered in a suitcase by a group of children on the outskirts of Buenos Aires in the summer of 2023. Similarly, the report references a kidnapping that took place in Ukraine last summer when 4 assailants abducted a 29-year-old man, stole 2 or 3 of his Bitcoin, and then murdered him. El País also highlights the attempted kidnapping of a crypto forum moderator in Quebec last January by attackers who planned to torture him and steal his BTC. But while all these are grisly wrench attacks involving kidnapping, we're not convinced that they inspired the serial cases in France, which have some important distinguishing features and are clearly a program by organized criminals. For example, the indirect targeting of the wealthy crypto holders via the kidnapping of their family members, and the ringleaders' recruitment and remote instruction of young criminals who they have never met via Telegram and Signal. So we think that France's predicament is best understood in the local context. Organized crime in the country has become emboldened in recent years, defying the state, attacking prisons, and leaving a trail of extremely gruesome and cruel murders in its wake that make the crypto kidnappings look mild by comparison. And this is useful to know, but does it mean that the rest of us are safe? Of course not.
Of course not.
You need only look at Jamison Lop's GitHub page to know that violence against crypto holders is now a global phenomenon. And if you are holding crypto or know someone who does, this is a risk you can't afford to ignore. It should be obvious, but remember, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by keeping the state of your finances to yourself. The bad news is that even if you don't tell a soul that you own crypto, you still might be targeted. And that's if you've ever completed a KYC process to use a crypto exchange or some other crypto service. Most of us have done this, exposing sensitive personal information with private companies who may not be able to keep it safe. Case in point, the Coinbase leak. Just recently, criminals managed to bribe Coinbase customer service workers at a call center in India to gain access to the exchange's customer database. According to Bloomberg, this low-tech method enabled the attackers to obtain names, date of birth, addresses, nationalities, government ID numbers, some banking data, and creation dates, and most crucially, balance details of Coinbase accounts for as many as 97,000 users. Once upon a time, this kind of thing couldn't happen in crypto because exchanges didn't collect this much information about their users in the first place. Of course, the global KYC regime changed all of that, forcing crypto users to dox themselves on every exchange in a bid to prevent crypto crime. It's a little ironic that the resulting customer databases now maintained by crypto exchanges are so easily accessible by criminals who can buy and sell information for identifying and locating new victims. Paymium, the company targeted in the recent botched kidnapping attempt on the CEO's family, made a similar point, criticizing the notorious travel rule that requires data to be collected about the source and recipient of crypto transfers. We wonder how many people will become victims of violent crime as a result of the Coinbase breach, and how many crypto holders have to become victims before privacy and anonymity start to look like a greater good than KYC and AML. Food for thought. For the time being, it looks like kidnapping is in fashion, so please be careful and keep as low a profile as possible when you are doing anything to do with crypto. For practical advice, check out our video rundown of the top do's and don'ts for keeping yourself and your crypto secure. That's right over here. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, you can do that right over here. That's me for now. Thank you very much for watching. Keep safe and secure. See you guys soon.